In a world where everybody lives with a clear mind and a rent-free state, as they peacefully enjoy looking at a beautiful piece of work called art.
COVID-19 has taken the world by storm, positive cases climbing exponentially, possibly the worst disease to ravage families and communities alike. Here is the latest news on how to stay safe.
Look at our world right now. Everybody is staying 6 feet apart. Every place and business is either shut down or closed so soon. Mask and social distancing is our only mechanism for survival. Why do I feel like my world is ending? How will I be able to showcase my art when I'm cooped up in my studio? Where are my audience and applause? But more importantly, my happiness to continue art in this pandemic.
First question is, who are you and what is your current profession?
Hi, my name is Sabrina Kwong. My Chinese name is Kwong Ting. I am a Chinese American artist. I'm a visual and performing one. I work with multimedia such as acrylics, watercolor, and even sculpture. I also work with digital content such as video and digital design.
Why did you decide to become an artist and what inspired you to start your career?
I think art has always been part of my life. My mom was a hairdresser. My grandma used to paint or draw little flowers on papers we found. She teach me how to grab rocks and make things on the floor. So I think since I was young, I always loved creating and making little things that are beautiful. So I think my love of art came from giving and the beauty, enjoy of beauty. So from growing up, giving my art away, I decided why not study it and then eventually make profit out of it.
What kind of artworks do you do?
So far right now, I'm working with paintings, such as like abstract paintings and paintings that are about identity. I work with watercolor. I also do doodles and sketches that I will sell, even commissions. If someone wants me to paint their bunnies or dogs, I'll do that. In the past, I used to work with sculptures, things that like found objects, such as tea bags, using the whole bag to make a bunny veil or a sculpture. So far, I work with found objects and any existing objects to create works towards identity and culture and just expression.
Do you have any examples that you would like to show the viewers?
Yeah.
Of your artworks?
So this is one. This piece is called Free. It's acrylic on canvas. It's quite tall. I painted this after going out and just really exploring nature, and I came back to paint this. So you can easily put it on someone's wall or put anywhere. So something like this is like decorative. I also paint this piece. It's for the color blue means to me and my identity. It's based on Vermeer's painting Woman in the Window. She was holding like a jug. So this lady is holding a teacup with a teapot next to her and some symbols of Chinese culture, such as a vase and Chinese calligraphy. This painting, oh, it's more like a illustration. It's based on a photo of my mom when she first immigrated here, and her just wearing a really cute jumpsuit. And I took that and drew it and made her a little story, like a mini mural of her life. Coming here as an immigrant and cutting hair. I think it's always great to reflect upon your past or your family. This is another one. I'll show you more. This one here. This one is of a girl. I used really just leftover gouache I found. Painted a person from a magazine. Thought she was very beautiful. So I painted it. Let's put this here now. And I'm still showing you one more. This is a piece. Surprisingly, I met someone else who painted something similar. Actually, two people. They painted how they felt. And this was a feeling of sadness and feeling alone. So I realized this is universal. People will paint something like this. Same colors, black and blue. It shows that we're all human. So I love art that way. How we were connected. A few more before I stop. But this is a painting from a dream. Surrealistic a little bit. Painting from meeting someone and just putting it on canvas.
Moment while you were creating your artwork?
I think while creating it would be the almost finished process of it, the product of it. While creating it, I love that I can make marks and create something that came out of nowhere. The past, something I always say to myself is, blank canvases make me dream. And when I see one, I see so much potential that can happen. I see there's so many ways to go about it, and I feel like I love a blank canvas. So to me, it's like my happiest moment. I was like, oh, I made something out of nothing.
Has COVID-19 ever impacted your career in art? If so, how and what measures did you take to continue your business?
Yeah, so during COVID, I was still in undergrad program at San Jose State. So I was still in school. I wasn't a full-time artist yet. I did get into a cohort called Hidden History San Jose Japantown. To me, it inhibited my process of creating my art because I was so away from my team, so away from the resources I needed. So to me, the growth that happened was COVID prevented a faster collaboration and a way to feel like safe making art together. So I think that's why it prevented. It's like that sense of community and space that people really like making art with.
Was there ever a time where you felt you lacked funding?
I think when COVID hit, we were able to still make profit. Like as an artist, if you work with students or a professor or like a small team, but I feel like there might have not been enough funds in the long run if there wasn't enough like compensation of the artist doing their work. So compensation usually works with how many hours and time you put in and the money you get into it. Like that you're given due to your work. So sometimes you work more hours, so you get less pay. So I think that's what happens. And I think there could always be, excuse me, I think there could always be more funding towards artists and their labor to be paid for the work that they do.
Was there a time when you lost passion? If so, how did you overcome that?
Yeah. I think through hardship, such as losing someone you know, or relationship ending, or any big changes such as losing a job or even graduating. I think that accumulated to a time when I just didn't want to do work because it was connected towards making the work and the feeling of it. So what I did was took a break from art. Took a break from it to explore other areas of interest, but knowing that I can always come back to it. Sharing my process or spending time with other artists, because I know I'm not alone in this process of not being able to create art and feeling that there's almost like a little stumble that we have done. But I think the most important thing is how we get back up.
Do you have any goals that you would like to accomplish by the end of this year? And if so, what are they?
So as a full-time artist, I've been calling myself one for 2.5 years now. My biggest goal is to create more artwork to sell, maybe internationally, if not be shown in museums. My biggest goal was to be shown in many places to represent my art in people who might see themselves in me. So I think my biggest goal is to show art in public spaces that are bigger than I can ever imagine.
What piece of advice would you give to future students and independent artists who want to step into this industry?
Yeah, my word of advice is to never stop asking questions, building upon your experiences and other people's experiences. I always recommend always being kind to yourself and others, maybe asking them their process, how they got there. Just be curious, like, hey, how did you make this? Can I know how long it took you to do this? Or maybe just asking them out for coffee. I think everyone is willing to tell each other or tell other people their stories, because it helps each other to figure out maybe a question they had on their own. So if you share your story, maybe someone else can share theirs. You're able to learn a lot from each other. So share stories.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Metz. I'm a sculptor based in San Jose, and I work primarily with fiber. Felting is when you're tangling fibers into a non-woven textile. So I'm starting with loose and fluffy fiber like this that has no real structure to it. The wool has been made ready to be spun into yarn, but instead I take this specialized tool. These are called felting needles. They're really, really sharp and they're notched so they feel kind of rough at the tip. And I start poking at the wool from all sides using my foam background. And I start poking into it, and when I poke from all sides I can make it more and more and more dense and compact, and I can really shape it and sculpt with it. So I do this a lot. It takes a long time, but I can make really solid forms. So this is just wool through and through. Because it's such an interesting organic material that kind of has some softness and some give to it, I really love to make organic subject matter. Sometimes I make fairly realistic things. Again, my background is in close study of actual form, and I've always been interested in biology and specimens from life. Then I also like to kind of make interesting different creative shapes out of it. So this kind of overbred creature is almost like a puppy with no head and no legs. It's kind of along the lines of what you see throughout my studio. I'm very much inspired by nature and science and just weird things, and I put them all together. And because I use this weird material, it gives it sort of an extra layer of believability almost, because it doesn't look like what you'd expect from sculpture. It almost looks alive.
How long would you say, like, even just like the pigeon project you were holding up earlier, like how long would you say that took you?
Probably about, for this size, probably about 15 hours or so.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know now if that feels like a lot or a little. My teddy bear skulls tend to take about 30 hours, but then my really large scale things can take a lot longer. And in fact, I did a really large scale project with human sized pieces, and I actually had volunteers come in my studio and help me. So I had a whole team of people coming in here. So this is one of my hanging pod sculptures that was part of this big project I called In Touch, where I actually made pieces that invited people to come up and touch them and interact with. These ones I stitched industrial felt that's really thick and made kind of the forms underneath, and then felted over them. And so they have different textures, different feel to them. This one actually feels pretty firm because the industrial felt that I used, I filled that stuffed animal kind of form with this kind of spray expanding foam that's more firm. These were the pieces that I worked for over 2 years to design this whole show of 12 of these pieces, and then in storage right now are a bunch of other touchable pieces made out of industrial felt. These all opened in January 2020. 8 weeks into that year is when COVID stuff happened. So the show was supposed to be up for 6 months, and instead it was up for 2 months, and then everything of course shut down, and all these things that were meant to be touched just had to hang in the dark for the rest of the 6 months before they could even return them to me. So I had a lot of people come in and actually get to engage with them, and I'm really grateful that I took a bunch of video and photos of it, because otherwise I wouldn't have had that. I kept thinking, people would say, oh, I can't get into it just right now, and oh, it's okay, it's up for 6 months. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. But I didn't get a chance to do the artist talk I was going to do, and a lot of people didn't get to see it, and I wanted to then have this body of work travel to other locations as well. And so that was all kind of frozen. And but what I did to kind of, part of how I coped with it was that I made a documentary of because I'd been how a huge part of the project was the satisfaction of the problem solving, of making things and figuring out how I could scale all these things up way bigger than I had ever done before. And just it reminded me of the satisfaction of that. And I just love the physical making, so it reminded me of that. And then I had all these people come in and help me, and that was a huge part of it. And it reminded me of that. So it was a really good for my mental health. It was good to make the whole documentary because it brought it all back, that it wasn't just about showing the work and having people in there, but the whole process of.
So, what was your happiest moment while you were creating art?
My happiest moment, I feel like there are a lot of multiple moments. I feel like when I'm making things, I'm generally pretty happy. It's really satisfying to me to make tangible things, and I really love to experiment, and that's one thing that kind of brought me to the wool. I was working in a frame shop, and a friend there showed me a magazine article about making wool into felt. And when I went to a yarn shop, the woman there said, "Oh, if you're doing sculpture, you don't want to do wet felting. Here's a book on needle felting." And that introduced me to the whole tool. And from there, I was just kind of playing and experimenting and learning.
Was there ever a time where you felt you lacked funding when pursuing your projects?
Yes, funding is always an issue. My materials are not particularly expensive. I'm not working in bronze or gold here, but still being able to have a space to work and the materials and everything else definitely costs money. And when I came up with the idea for the big interactive touchable multi-part sculpture project, I knew that at that time I was at a different studio that was smaller, so I knew that besides everything else I was going to need to have a bigger studio space. And so for that whole project I did a lot of fundraising. I'd had people who'd been supportive of my work in the past, and I actually wrote letters to people who'd been collectors saying, "Hey, this is the project that I'm doing. I would love to have your support in this. Would you want to help me?" And so I had some people contribute to the project that way. I made, for example, sketches and some of the wool drawings that I do related to the sculpture I was doing. Those I could sell to be able to help fund the project. And then the whole crowdsourcing campaign was new to me. The tricky thing with that is that with the crowdsourcing thing, I felt like I had to give people something in return, but I didn't want it to be anything that would take so long to make that it would take away from the main thrust of what I'm doing. So I do these little wool drawings where I actually use fiber to draw with, and I scanned a few of those so that I can make prints of those, and I made a catalog of some of my previous work and little sets of cards and things. So between that, and I got a couple of small grants as well, so I kind of just had to like put it together from a bunch of different places. It's tricky, but it's definitely one of the hats you have to wear as an artist, figuring out how to fund things. But some of the places where I was going to teach, for example, because we couldn't go teach that summer because nobody was going to be getting together, they actually had a funder give them some money so they could pay us anyway.
How did your progress with your art profession change over the course of the years, and how has COVID impacted that as well?
And so I studied fairly classical sculpture techniques, and then after school I got a job for a company that did themed environments. I was trying to move more into the whole like animatronic graphics kind of stuff, but I ended up trying this job where it was kind of like a whole team that would have to work on these three-dimensional. And so after that, I decided, you know what, I need to just figure out something else. I think I need to just make my own art, but I don't know how that would be. And so in the meantime, I was working in a frame shop because I was, then I was being around a lot of art, and I started volunteering and getting involved at Work San Jose, which is the local art and performance space that's been around for probably 40-some years now. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I stumbled across this material because a coworker showed me the magazine that got me into trying the supplies and the materials. And so I started making work out of felt, and I started showing it, and at the same time I was getting pretty involved with the art and performance space. I was helping write grants, and then eventually I was the vice president, and then suddenly I was the president. So I was also having to practice hanging shows, speaking about my work, or speaking about art, and speaking about anything in front of crowds, and can tell you a story. And so suddenly when I was working with this material, it kind of clicked that I could make kind of pseudo fake science by using this material that's kind of squishy and kind of firm at the same time. So this is the idea of humans taking basically breeding of other animals to ridiculous extremes. So like this guy has no head because it's just there to report. It steered me. So now I have a couple different branches of what I do. I make things and I get to show them. And before, when I was still a very much emerging artist, you'd apply to shows and apply to juried things, and they'd maybe select you and have your work in there. And now, years later, people know my work and they know me and they approach me. And so it's nice to have that and get to kind of show things. And then I also teach my techniques either through different schools or different outfits or just on my own. And then I sell some of the, almost like the merchandise associated. Like I have photographs of the teddy bear skulls because not everybody can afford to or has space in their life to have a three-dimensional sculpture. So what I had right before COVID was for years, people have always wanted to touch my work because it looks soft and it looks squishy. And we humans have these, fine, sensitive fingertips, and we want to explore through touch. So that was sort of an answer to a big shock. And then because I couldn't, with the shelter in place, I wasn't even coming in here. So I have a little workspace at home. And so from going from these huge social things with 20 people in my studio all working together and chatting all day to suddenly just being at home with small things, I started making these much smaller pieces. These are tiny little things that incorporate eggshells. So, you get in your daily routine, and I would, make an egg sandwich every morning, and I try to put the two halves of the egg back together. And when they would dry, I found that they had these beautiful patterns inside them of the albumin that would kind of dry out and crackle. And so, of course, I decided to make little pieces with them. And it was really fitting because not only were they on a really tiny, kind of personal, intimate scale, but also the idea of the egg, and that an egg is meant to protect the creature that it's harboring, but it also is something that can feed other creatures, so that the shell is both protection and defense and access. So having these little cracked shells really kind of spoke to me of the different meanings, the two different ways to think about, is this broken or is it setting something free? Is it something that fed something or it gave life? Either way, it gave life.